So much for the art of the deal. Russian President Vladimir Putin making a fool of Donald Trump, refusing to halt the ongoing war in Ukraine despite Trump's repeated pleas. Perhaps these two actually aren't in cahoots and Trump is just a terrible negotiator. Welcome to the No Spin Zone. Graphs Grievances starts right now. Almost exactly 2 years ago, in March of 2023, Donald Trump promised Fox News that if reelected, he would, quote, solve Russia's war in Ukraine in 24 hours.
Get along very well with Putin. But if this thing isn't solved by the time we have the election, which is possible, it won't be, I will have it solved in 24 hours with Zelensky and with Putin. And there's a very easy negotiation to take place, but I don't want to tell you what it is because then I can't use that negotiation. It'll never work. But there's a very easy negotiation to take place. I will have it solved within one day, a peace between them.
The then presidential candidate making that bold and almost fantastical claim, insisting he could bring peace between Russia and Ukraine in one day. Trump repeated this promise constantly throughout his 2024 campaign, painting then President Joe Biden as weak and ineffective. Well, now it's been over 75 days since Trump returned to the White House, and we've learned the truth. Ending this war is far more complicated than Trump promised us. Despite suspending all U.S. military aid to Ukraine, halting U.S. intelligence sharing with them, cutting off Ukraine's access to U.S. satellite imagery, withdrawing the U.S. from international efforts to investigate Russia's invasion, and ending U.S. funding for tracking the tens of thousands of Ukrainian children abducted by Russia, Ukraine refuses to give up. They continue to heroically defend their sovereign democratic country against authoritarian Russia's unprovoked invasion. Seeming to realize his strategy of cutting off Ukraine's resources to force an end to the war has failed, Trump resorted to calling the other party in this conflict the aggressor, Russian President Vladimir Putin. The two leaders chit-chatting for 90 minutes Tuesday and not seeming to accomplish much. Putin offering to hold off striking Ukraine's energy infrastructure for 30 days if Ukraine did the same. But analysts say it's a self-serving move to protect Russia's energy infrastructure, which Ukraine has aggressively targeted. And just to underline how ineffective Trump's efforts were, as soon as the call ended, Putin launched a fresh drone assault over Kyiv and several other Ukrainian cities. Trump prides himself on being an unparalleled negotiator. In fact, his first book, The Art of the Deal, is a monument to his self-image as a titan of industry. A man whose negotiating skills are beyond reproach. This myth made him a star on NBC's The Apprentice, where Trump judged aspiring business tycoons' skills for almost a decade. But while millions of Americans, my middle school self included, bought into that image, Putin didn't. Putin has been manipulating Trump since their first meeting in 2018 in Helsinki. You might remember that summit where Trump met privately with Putin for nearly 2 hours without any American aides or even a translator. When they emerged, Trump shocked the world by siding with Putin and rejecting U.S. intelligence on Russia's interference in the 2016 election. That moment sparked bipartisan outrage and revived the claim by Republican House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy that, quote, Putin pays Trump. Nearly a decade later, it's clear Trump isn't the master negotiator he claims to be. Instead, he appears to be Putin's unwitting pawn, easily outmaneuvered in negotiating, including over one of his few specific campaign promises, ending the war in Ukraine. As for what comes next in this brutal war, who's to say? But based on what we've seen since Trump regained the Oval Office 2 months ago, it looks like the U.S. support for Ukraine is over for good. And that's because Trump, along with Republicans who control the House and the Senate, don't want to fund their fight. The real question now is whether Europe can and will pick up the slack, supplying Ukraine with enough weapons to continue fighting. Since the war began in February 2022, the U.S. has provided Ukraine with over $122 billion in military, financial, and humanitarian aid, while the European Union has spent roughly the same amount, $121 billion. Can the EU spend more? Probably. But doubling their commitment? That seems unlikely. So the situation looks bleak. Not just for Ukraine, but for all of Europe, because Putin isn't stopping at Ukraine. He has his eyes set on restoring the Soviet Union to its former glory, expanding Russia's reach across as much of Europe as possible. As former President Joe Biden warned repeatedly, the war in Ukraine is a proxy battle between democracy and autocracy. For nearly 250 years, America has stood firmly for democracy. Yet Trump seems intent on flipping the script, aligning himself and the United States with autocracies like Russia and China. At the end of the day, this will be a disaster for Ukraine, for Europe, and ultimately for democracy here at home. Trump's self-proclaimed mastery of negotiation hasn't just failed on the world stage, it's put Ukraine, Europe, and the global stability in jeopardy. The real question now isn't whether the U.S. can recover from this blunder, but whether the rest of the world can continue the fight for democracy in America's absence. Thank you for watching Graf's Grievances. Let me know what you think. Please like, subscribe, share, and join me tomorrow for more.